Welcome back, warriors, to the crap-encrusted chronicles of the worst fighting game, the always raging tournament to crown the very best of the very worst. And today's contender is absolutely considered one of the very, very worst. The arcade version of Pit Fighter is not, a nuanced, technical fighting game. It doesn't have a lot of features, characters, and by and large, positive aspects to it, but you have to consider the pre-Street Fighter II timeframe it was released in. There really wasn't any established rules or pillars of design to adhere to yet, as it was still the Wild West in terms of button bashing. Despite that, Pit Fighter was a smash success in arcades the world over, generating quite a bit of profit for Atari throughout 1990, so it looked like the promising start of a new franchise. Those plans went distinctly sideways, however, with the release of the various home ports, and one in particular that's often considered not just one of the worst fighting games of all time, but one of the worst games, period. But we won't know for sure if that's truly the case until we get Pit Fighter in the ring. Pit. The team behind the original arcade game was led by two people, with the first being Mark Steven Pierce, who produced a number of Atari's coin-ops, but is probably most famous for being the creative lead of Dark Castle. The other was Gary Stark, the programmer behind arcade hits such as Tubin', Hard Drivin', and Race Drivin'. I'm kinda surprised he didn't lobby for Pit Fighter to be called Pit Fightin'. Anyway, multiplexes and rental stores in the late 80s were being assaulted by a number of American martial arts films, like the Karate Kid series, Best of the Best, Bloodsport, Kick Fist, The Punchinators, etc. Obviously, this started to be reflected in video games, a trend that Atari was quick to mount and start throwing punches at. Another developer by the name of Robert Rowe, who specialized in the new technology of digitization, convinced Atari higher-ups to spring for more powerful arcade hardware, which paved the way to use digitization to bring the bulging biceps and baby-oiled chests of Pit Fighter to life. And since the 1v1 nature of the fighting game hadn't yet been nailed down, Pit Fighter kinda did its own thing, and because of its striking look, which was 2 years before Mortal Kombat, it became a huge money spinner for Atari, becoming the top earner in most of the world, and wow, it even did well in Japan. It should be noted though, despite its graphical similarities, the Mortal Kombat team wasn't really influenced by Pit Fighter's success, as many at Midway, including Ed Boon, had worked on the precursor to Blitz, the high-impact football series, which used copious amounts of digitization as well and released the very same year as Pit Fighter did. Moving on, because Buzz, Kato, and Ty really racked up the dollars in the arcades, this naturally led to ports. Many ports on various home computers, handhelds, and consoles. For our match today, I'm going to be looking at the three most well-known versions: the arcade original, the Genesis, and of course, the Super Nintendo. Now, the backstory as to why the quality of Pit Fighter ports is all over the place is because of Tengen, which was the home console label Atari launched to publish games across all formats. Very quickly, Tengen locked horns with Nintendo over the strict guidelines for third-party games on their hardware, which Tengen would time and time again try to get around, which is what gave us the infamous unlicensed black label Tengen games you'd occasionally see in bargain bins. This battle raged on until 1994, which Nintendo predictably won. Before that though, since Pit Fighter was a huge arcade smash, Atari and likewise Nintendo didn't want to leave any money on the table, so Atari decided to sub-license the Nintendo publishing rights to THQ, who in 1991 were not quite the experienced massive company they would later become. Tengen handled all the other ports, which, while of course taking the expected hits in graphics and sound, did their best to emulate the arcade original. But this deal also seemed to be made in quite a hurry because because that's the only reason I can think of to explain the everything. Regardless of the critical reception, Pit Fighter at least saw some success, on the Genesis at least, so that a console-exclusive sequel was put into production, imaginatively called Pit Fighter 2, as per EGM issue number 49. This was going to introduce 3 more playable characters, each of them plucked from Atari's 1992 brawler / semi-sequel to Pit Fighter, Guardians of the Hood, as well as new weapons, backgrounds, and a rough release date of late 1993. However, it was then suddenly and quietly cancelled without any explanation from Atari, and Pit Fighter was never mentioned again. So yeah, let's find out why. So, I'm just going to state the obvious here. Pit Fighter doesn't look nearly as good as Mortal Kombat, but considering it's 2 years older, it's still kind of impressive in its own right. You're treated to a great intro that's late 80s, early 90s as fuck, and showcases our 3 Chad-like heroes working out before getting to the action. When said action does kick in, the sprites immediately start scaling depending on how close or far to the screen they are, which gives the illusion of depth, which, while it takes some getting used to, is still kinda neat. There's a ton of background characters on all sides of the arena, or pit as well, and while it's off-putting they're mostly in grayscale, you can see the reasoning behind it. If they were all as colorful as the combatants, it would be a visual mess, a problem that would be tripled when fighting in 3-player mode. Of course, animation is kind of the big problem here, as it's not exactly what one would call smooth, but I think that's something I'll talk about a bit more in depth later on. There's a good amount of pretty clear digitized speech used throughout as well, from various yes and come ons of victory to the ultimate or masked warrior occasionally popping up to talk that shit at you in between matches.
Just wait, you die.
Music is fine too. I mean, it has a lot of that long, protracted, robotic farting that typified the Genesis soundscape and does lack the melody and atmosphere of most of its later contemporaries, but it's still pretty in line with the kind of stuff you'd hear in the arcades circa 1990. There's not much to the story here either. As one of the 3 heroes, you enter the quote-unquote ultimate competition to take down the masked warrior and prove your superiority to all the drunks and deadbeats in the crowd. Sadly, there's no unique endings for either Buzz, Kato, or Tai, but this was very early on in the fighting game, so I'll give it a pass. Oh, I forgot there are these 2 lovely digitized ladies who do show up to celebrate with you, so I guess that's its own reward. Now that's all the arcade version, so why don't we move on to the Genesis, which rather impressively manages to hold its own. Yeah, the sprites are much smaller, there's no scaling, there's simplified backgrounds, and there's less color overall, but the intro, most of the digitized speech, and the soundtrack is all intact, and is pretty comparable with the arcade. Hell, even the celebratory Digi-ladies are here to keep the party poppin'. The Super Nintendo version, meanwhile, it has slightly more colors, and that's it. It doesn't have the intro, has a new terrible HUD that gets rid of all the helpful life bars and replaces them with tiny numbers. The ladies are completely MIA, thanks Miyamoto, and worst of all, absolutely the worst of all, it completely biffed it in the music department. The tracks that are here have a distinct Super NES quality to them, but that doesn't mean they're automatically good at all. And also, I keep inferring that there's more than one song, which there's not. There is only one singular track and it plays on every single screen on loop without ever stopping. This absolutely smacks of THQ having, zero time, money, or fucks to give, I guess. And also, that's going to be a running theme. Especially when we talk about the... Now, try to be shocked here, but Pit Fighter is a very simple game. You have a punch, a kick, and a jump button, which allows you to rove around the arena, making it feel more like a beat-em-up than anything else. Each character also has their own set of special moves, which are also pretty basic. A roundhouse, a body slam, a pile driver, a headbutt, no fireballs or hurricane kicks here. You can hit enemies while they're down though, and there is a universal throw where you can gorilla press your opponent, which is something, I guess. Aside from that, you can also use weapons that are strewn around the arena. Bats, knives, crates, barrels, and even crazier stuff like shurikens and even motorcycles. The crowd can even get involved too. Some will push you back into the fight, while others that are more brightly colored will even take a wild stab at you, which is pretty ahead of its time. I can't remember many other fighting games that did this until like Def Jam or Tekken 4. Something else I don't remember other fighters doing though is not replenishing your health bar. After every match in Pit Fighter, you're stuck with whatever damage you previously took, as this guarantees no matter how good you are, you're gonna have to pump in more quarters eventually, which, fair play, I suppose. That's still not everything. Occasionally, you'll also find an item called a power pill that pumps up whoever grabs it with a sudden burst of muscle power. So, for a more accurate name, you might as well call it the Steiner pill.
He's fat!
Honestly, between all this stuff, Pit Fighter doesn't play as badly as you might think. Sure it ain't great, but for a couple of matches of mindless mayhem, it's good for a laugh. In terms of modes, well, there really isn't much here, but there is something. Every other fight is a grudge match where you take on one of the other heroes in 3 knockdown bouts. Fortunately, if you get knocked down yourself, you still get to continue, as this is just for extra points, but your morale is lowered considerably because you do get branded as a loser.
Dear God. Okay, let's just move on, alright?
Like I mentioned before, 3-player fights are possible too. This is where you and some buddies take on the CPU, and then hash it out to see who's the strongest amongst you in an elimination match before you confront Lord Humongous, or let's just call him Duke Gigantic. Now some, but not all, of this stuff is carried over into the home ports. The Genesis version axes the 3-player fights, of course, but you can still co-op with a friend. The moves are all there too, including the weapons and interactions with the background NPCs, as well as the big pop-up pump pills.
And I'm not normal!
It also has a very basic options mode where you can fiddle with a few things, and hell, it even contains a weird practice feature where you're still fighting an active CPU that attacks you back, but it lets you quickly try out a character and push some buttons with absolutely nothing on the line. Finally, the Genesis version adjusts itself from the quarter-munchy nature of the arcade by giving the player 3 lives at the start of the game. It's still hard, and it also doesn't replenish your health between each match, but it still seems fairly manageable. The Super Nintendo version is the complete polar opposite of all this. There is no options menu anywhere, which is like a first on this show. No options. Really? I think there might be a hidden difficulty menu where each character represents it, with Buzz getting the easiest opponents, Ty getting the middle of the road guys, and Kato getting the hardest of the hard? But that ain't fair. So if you're a Kato main, you're just screwed then? More importantly than that, though, is the mechanics, in that there's barely any. No weapons, no Steiner pills, no crowd interaction, nothing. You can't tell me the SNES couldn't render a stick or a knife, so I gotta, again, chalk this up to THQ having neither the time nor the skill to program this stuff into it. But you know what they did have time for? Possibly implementing any sort of basic method to complete the game. Unlike the Genesis version, the SNES offers no lives or any way to continue, but still keeps the non-generating life bar for some reason. So you have to beat the entire game with only one life, and 0 continues. Now, the instruction manual says you can gain life back at specific and very high point thresholds, but fuck me or anyone else if they can do that. You have to basically play flawlessly and knock out your opponent in record time each and every time. And if you're attempting that in either 1991 or 2024, you should just really reevaluate your life. I myself tried my damnedest to get far in this version for this video, but I couldn't defeat the second opponent because I was already beat to hell from the first guy, and you have to fight like 15 of them. The wrinkle to that for the SNES version is that 3 CPU-controlled characters are totally absent. Southside Jim, Mad Miles, and Heavy Metal appear in both the arcade and Genesis versions, but they're MIA here. In their place, you just fight the other characters in a ton of rematches, so THQ made sure to go out of their way to make this even more repetitive than it already is. How the fuck is this game missing this much content? Like, I would have tracked down some of the developers who worked on this port to explain what happened, but I can't find them anywhere. There's no credit screen in the SNES version, the manual, or Moby Games. Like, who programmed this thing? Like Mysterious Orphans? Okay, so the main reason why you shouldn't bother to get good at Pit Fighter on the SNES is obviously the lack of compelling mechanics, but also, even more obviously, it's because of how awful it feels to actually control. The arcade version, as I alluded to before, has some pretty choppy animation, which leads to certain attacks not feeling very impactful, while simultaneously feeling too fast and overall just kinda sloppy. The Genesis port, meanwhile, actually feels a bit better. The animation is still not great, but attacks are somehow a tad more precise and responsive. The SNES port, while technically having the exact same button layout, is nevertheless way worse. The animation is more limited, the collision detection and hitboxes are all messed up, it's not as snappy, etc., etc. It honestly barely feels like you're controlling the characters at all. The demo could be playing and you could be pantomiming on the controller and it wouldn't feel much different from actually playing a match. So again, while none of these versions actually feel great to play, there obviously is a spectrum of quality that they land on. Atari did improve the game feel somewhat in Guardians of the Hood, but yeah, there's a reason why they didn't continue using digitization of human actors at least, and basically let Midway truly popularize the graphical technique. With all that said though, you always have to come back to the fact that Pit Fighter, yes, predated many games that would take the fighting genre to the next level. But in the case of the home ports, specifically the SNES, it had come out after Street Fighter II had done just that. In fact, the SNES port of Pit Fighter released just a few months before Street Fighter II, so you'd think someone would have said, yeah, guys, maybe we should consider using our whole ass here. But no, not even one cheek, not even a quarter cheek. Like, this is, let me reiterate, there's no options screen, tons of missing mechanics, characters, a bad HUD, no music, unresponsive as hell, and freaking one life bar. One! Yeah, there is a code for unlimited continues, but I mean, that doesn't count. Now, I did also want to quickly address something else. All of these issues are duplicated on the Game Boy version, which was also ported by THQ, but like I've said before in previous episodes, the Game Boy had no business trying to run fighting games. I mean, you might as well ask me to review the Tiger Electronic handhelds too, which I'm not doing. So yeah, the arcade version of Pit Fighter, you know, it's tolerable. Genesis port, actually pretty impressive considering the hardware, but oh, the SNES version, Criticom had music and endings. Expect No Mercy had multiple characters and fatalities, and Ravenloft had mechanics and game modes. Pit Fighter for the SNES has none of these. Like, it doesn't have an options screen. Again, I hate to repeat myself, but I will anyway. What sort of cataclysmic, crunch-filled, torturous time frame did they have to work with here? Why was the simple act of adding lives or weapons or music impossible? It's truly unbelievable. While I can't find any hard data for how well Pit Fighter home port sold, it must have been reasonably well for Atari/Tengen to greenlight a sequel for the Genesis. But either maybe due to the domination of Mortal Kombat, or I think Pit Fighter's now horribly stained reputation, they just roundhouse kicked the entire thing into cancellation. Like, they were probably thinking, oh god, we're never coming back from this, are we? So let's not even bother. I mean, hell, even the toxic positivity of classic Nintendo Power didn't pull any punches with this one, saying it was extremely difficult to control. And is the game fun? The answer in this case is no. But is it the worst fighting game? Well, the answer in this case is yes. Move over, Ravenloft, because your proclamations of combination are now over. The SNES was capable of so much more, has one of the best libraries of all time, but Pit Fighter is an example of the very bottom of it. Not just of button bashers, but games in general. There's just so little to actually play. Like, it feels like it's 40% done, and they were just like, yeah, let's just ship this crap, and hopefully in 32 years, loudmouth cartoon skeleton men won't be making fun of it still. Well, sorry to disappoint you, imaginary THQ man, because it absolutely is still worth making fun of. So yeah, moving this guy down here, and then moving this guy up here. Wow, there you go. Also, the arcade and Genesis versions are both, I don't know, fairly stinky. And that, Warriors, is another blood-soaked contest that has come to a close, and with a new champion, no less. But do you know of any other contenders that might give Pit Fighter a run for its money? Let me know in the comments below or over on the fighting temples of my social media. Until then, I will see you next time on the worst fighting game.